If you've ever walked across the beautiful, sprawling campus of Louisiana State University, you're literally walking on layers of history. But a lot of that history, a story of plantations, of enslaved people, of conflict, it's been hidden in plain sight. So in this explainer, we're going to dig it up. Okay, so let's start our journey by just watching the land itself transform over time. Here's an aerial view from 1929. You can see the first hints of the university, right? But look at everything around it. It's all agricultural fields, a direct echo of its not-so-distant past as a working sugar plantation. Now, fast forward a decade to 1939. The campus is really starting to expand. You can see the modern grid of the university taking shape, and it's literally paving over more and more of that old plantation land. And then, boom! By 1964, the transformation is almost total. This looks like the LSU most people would recognize today. Tiger Stadium is there, the lakes are there. But with this physical change, the memory of what was here before, well, it was almost completely buried and forgotten. But what happens when a history that's been physically erased is suddenly and unexpectedly brought back to the surface? Well, that is exactly what happened in 2021. Researchers, poring over old historical maps, pinpointed the location of a forgotten cemetery for enslaved people. And it was right there, right near the Student Health Center, in the heart of campus. This single discovery sparked a new, really urgent conversation about the history literally beneath students' feet. So, let's explore what they found. First up, we're going to explore the campus's deep roots in the institution of slavery, a foundation that was built on wealth, on forced labor, and on the starkly different ways the past has been remembered. And wow, this slide right here perfectly captures the stark contrast in how history has been memorialized. On the left, you've got this well-maintained grand obelisk for the Duplantier family, the enslavers. And on the right, a simple map marking the rediscovered, unmarked location of the cemetery for the enslaved people they owned. One history was celebrated, the other was just erased. But, these weren't just forgotten places. They were sacred ground, and oral histories give a voice to the people who were buried there. Listen to Catherine Cornelius, who was interviewed back in the 1940s as she remembered her mother's funeral. She said, "No, we know markers or headstones, but we planted willow trees to know the place." And then there's Ida Owen, who was actually born on the very land that became LSU. She recalled, "The plantation cemetery was where my mama was buried and my grandmother. If someone died, you'd better go to the funeral. You put that hoe down and go to the funeral." Now let's look at how even something that seems like a simple landmark can tell a really complex two-sided story. This is the sugar kettle. It's a prominent landmark right there on campus, and it has a plaque right beside it. And here's the key, right? It's this huge gap between the official story and the unspoken one. The plaque celebrates the kettle for revolutionizing Louisiana's economy, but it completely leaves out the other side of the story, that this innovation was powered by the absolutely brutal 24/7 labor of enslaved people, working in the intense heat and smoke of the sugar house. All right, so this brings us to the next chapter in the university's history, the long legacy of the Civil War and how its symbols and myths were physically woven right into the school's identity. Have you ever wondered why LSU's teams are called the Tigers? I mean, it's a great mascot, but it's not just some random choice. The answer is actually deeply rooted in military history. So the name comes directly from Lee's Louisiana Tigers, which was a nickname for Louisiana units that fought for the Confederacy. The football team officially adopted it in 1896. Now, think about that date for a second. 1896 is the exact same year the Supreme Court's separate but equal ruling legalized segregation. So the team's very name is tied to glorifying the Confederacy right as the Jim Crow era was beginning. And this memorialization was not subtle. This plaque, which is inside the campus military museum, explicitly honors cadets who died fighting for the Confederacy. It's such a clear example of how the lost cause narrative, that revisionist history that tried to glorify the Confederacy, was physically enshrined on campus. Okay, now let's jump forward into the 20th century and look at the physical spaces on campus where the long, hard fight for civil rights and integration actually played out. For years and years, the university administration actively fought to keep the campus segregated. This is from a letter, a real letter, sent in 1950 by Dean Richard J. Russell to a black applicant. It says, Under the statutes and educational policies of the state of Louisiana, I do not have the authority to admit you. Louisiana State University is unable to admit Negro students.
So here's the thing. Today, the Howard Russell Knife and Geoscience Complex is named, in part, for that very same dean. He was a celebrated geographer for sure, but he was also a key figure in enforcing segregation. It just shows how the names on our buildings can carry these really complicated and contested histories.
And this conflict, it played out in some very public ways. The campus swimming pool became a huge battleground. In 1961, LSU's president flat out said he'd rather close the pool than integrate it. And then in '64, when a black student tried to use it, that's exactly what they did. They closed it, blaming get this, a fake earthquake. It was only after fierce student protests that the Board of Supervisors finally gave in and reopened the pool to everyone in 1965. So finally, let's bring the story all the way into the present day and see how these historical layers continue to shape the campus and the conversations that are happening right now. These are the Allen Hall murals. They were painted back in the 1930s to depict Louisiana workers, but they've become a modern-day controversy. The murals show black workers in subservient roles, and a lot of students today find them racist and unwelcoming in an academic space. It really shows how the campus is still grappling with how to interpret its own past. And the legacies of this history? Well, you can see them in the numbers too. In 2023, just 4.6% of tenured or tenure-track faculty at LSU identified as black. And this chart here really puts that number into perspective. While black students make up about 17.5% of the student body, which is progress, it's still a long way from reflecting the state's population, where black citizens make up 33%, so there's still a pretty significant representation gap. All of this brings us to one final big question. Knowing that this deep, this complex, and this often painful history is literally written on the landscape, what is the responsibility of those of us who walk it every single day?